Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast, your ongoing source for clear, structured updates on global geostrategic challenges. We explore the forces shaping global power, crisis hotspots, and how governments react so you stay informed with less effort.
Welcome. Today, we're diving into something pretty heavy, a profoundly critical and, well, definitely controversial topic. It's this reported plan by Israel's government for a full occupation of Gaza. We're going to try and unpack the complexities, the potential consequences, which sound, frankly, catastrophic, and we're drawing straight from the recent reporting and analysis you sent over.
Absolutely. And the stakes here are just incredibly high for everyone involved. At the core of this, you've got the fate of those remaining hostages. You've got the military strategy, which keeps evolving, and then the immense humanitarian impact on the ground for civilians. A big piece we'll explore is the view from inside Israel, the debates, the arguments happening within the government, within the military, and we'll also look at the stark reality of urban warfare, which is just reshaped Gaza so dramatically. It's a tangled picture, no doubt.
Okay, let's get into it then. The big reveal, the heart of this, is that Benjamin Netanyahu's government is reportedly actually considering a plan for full occupation of Gaza. Now, this isn't just talk. It's being framed quite deliberately, it seems, as a final attempt.
Yeah.
A final attempt to rescue the hostages who are left and, at the same time, wipe out Hamas. That's a huge claim.
It really is. And it's not just another move on the board. It's seen as a major gamble. Why? Because it means breaking what's basically been a taboo throughout this IDF campaign. The plan involves major ground operations, going deep into the very urban areas where they believe the hostages are being held. We're talking Gaza City up north, Deir al-Balah in the center. And what's really crucial to understand, as you pointed out, is these are the last big urban zones that haven't been totally flattened, precisely because intelligence suggested hostages were there.
Oh.
And right now, about 1.4 million Palestinians are living in those areas.
1.4 million. And the risks jump out immediately, don't they? Critics are already saying, look, if this happens, the hostages that are still alive, they'll likely die in the crossfire in the operation itself. And what really makes you pause is that apparently Netanyahu's own generals are deeply opposed. That's a strong phrase. He sort of hinted at something in that oblique video address, didn't he? Mentioning freeing Gaza from terrorists.
Yeah.
And then came the leaks, unattributed, of course, suggesting occupation is the way forward now that the formal talks with Hamas fell apart last month.
Right. And if you contrast that occupation idea with what else is apparently being floated, there's talk of an encirclement plan. That sounds more like something the military chiefs were developing, setting up semi-permanent zones for raids. It really points to a serious disagreement inside the Israeli establishment, doesn't it? But just to be clear, this isn't just speculation. Sharon Haskell, Israel's deputy foreign minister, she publicly confirmed the occupation plan is still being discussed. It's definitely on the table.
And the human side of this, it's just awful. The reaction from the hostage families. Vicky Cohen, her son Nimrod, is a captured soldier. She was quoted saying, "That means one thing. It means they will only bring our brothers back in coffins." I mean, that statement just cuts right through, doesn't it? Shows you the perceived stakes for those most affected.
It does. So it begs the question. With all these risks, this opposition, why push this now? What's the government's rationale? Well, it seems to center on the truly dire situation of those remaining 20 hostages thought to still be alive. The argument is the longer this drags on, the more danger they're in. We saw those awful videos recently, right? Eviatar David, Ron Brislavsky, looking emaciated. Mr. David apparently forced to dig his own grave, Mrs. Haskell put it bluntly. Hamas right now is killing them slowly, starving them, torturing them. They say the only way to bring them back is through military operations. The thinking is massive military pressure is the only shot they have left.
But that pressure cooker is boiling over internally, too. Reports of major pushback from the military. LT Gen Zamir, the IDF chief of staff specifically, he apparently thinks the IDF has pushed as far as it safely can to pressure Hamas on hostages. And then the political leaks targeting him this week. Pretty sharp stuff. Suggestions from unnamed senior officials that, well, if the plan doesn't work for the chief of staff, he should resign. Even Netanyahu's son, Yair, weighed in on social media about Zamir's appointment. It feels quite personal.
It does, and it taps into this wider context of, sometimes strained civil-military relations in Israel, which isn't entirely new, but this feels acute. LT Gen Zamir canceling that trip to CENTCOM in the U.S., that's the U.S. Central Command HQ. I mean, that raised eyebrows. Some saw it as maybe a sign of a real crisis at the top, a breakdown of that key defense link with the U.S. That's significant. And remember, this is happening not long after that unprecedented open letter. 550 retired senior military figures, spy chiefs, writing to Donald Trump, urging him to pressure Netanyahu to end what they called an unjust war. The whole image of IDF commanders being above politics, these neutral professionals, he has core to Israel's self-image as a democracy. His friction really challenges that perception.
Exactly, and you can feel that concern for Israel's standing, both internationally and how it sees itself. Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, basically pleaded for Netanyahu and Zamir to keep their fights private, behind closed doors. There's a real worry, isn't there, that asking an already stretched, exhausted army to go even further, Netanyahu risks damaging that core ideal. And beyond the ideals, just practically pushing into these areas could stretch belief for Israelis in the middle ground. Polls keep showing, yes, hit Hamas hard, but the #1 priority for most Israelis, get the hostages back now, even if it means a deal, even if it means ending the war. So this really puts Netanyahu in a tough spot regarding his handling of the conflict, potentially losing domestic backing too.
And then there's the impact on Gaza's civilians. The potential consequences are, catastrophic is probably the right word. We've already seen it, haven't we? Earlier operations, like Operation Gideon's Chariot, air power, heavy ordnance. They demolished large areas of residential neighborhoods. That's the reality. What it means on the ground is that Rafah in the south, large parts of Khan Yunis, they just don't exist like they used to. You have hundreds of thousands crammed into makeshift camps, tent cities scattered across the coast.
So if they applied that same logic, that same approach to Gaza City, you're talking another 1 million people displaced.
Yeah.
Roughly half the entire population of the Strip. It's almost impossible to really wrap your head around the scale of that potential destruction. As someone studying this, what hits you hardest about that kind of potential displacement?
It's the sheer scale, definitely. 1 million people forced to move. Maybe not just once, but multiple times. That fundamentally changes the society, maybe for generations. It's a profound cost, often kind of hidden behind the immediate conflict headlines. And this devastation we've already seen in Gaza makes you ask why? Why has it been so incredibly widespread? Hamas's strategy, quite deliberately, has been to turn Gaza into essentially a military redoubt disguised as a civilian population center. Think about it. An estimated 400 miles of tunnels dug over 16 years. That's an unprecedented underground city, used for moving fighters, storing weapons, command centers, even living quarters. The IDF figures suggest over 5,000 shafts were dug to get into these tunnels, often hidden inside ordinary houses, hospitals, schools, mosques, and many are booby-trapped.
400 miles, and it's not just the tunnels, is it? It's the buildings themselves, used as arms dumps. Finding grenades under kids' beds, rocket launchers in kitchens, as the sources describe, and this figure, some 40% of buildings in Gaza, 100,000 structures rigged with explosives, many with cameras set up for remote detonation when troops get close. That analogy in the source material really sticks with you. The comparison to the IRA booby-trapping a house in Belfast, where explosives were used to clear it rather than risky OD teams.
Exactly. An IDF soldier's life is prioritized, understandably. Destroying the building becomes the grimly preferable option compared to sending someone in to defuse it under those conditions. And there's another factor. Secondary explosions. An IDF precision strike hits its target, but if Hamas has stored explosives or missiles nearby, boom, adjacent buildings can come down. Or if a tunnel network collapses underneath, the foundations of the buildings above can just give way. So the devastation, while horrific, isn't always a direct result of targeting civilian structures per se. It's more complex.
Which leads to that really bitter irony. This destruction is, in a way, by Hamas's deliberate design. By embedding their military assets within civilian areas, they can then point the finger at Israel for the inevitable destruction and the humanitarian fallout, which fuels international condemnation. It's a brutal strategy. And the timing, talk of full occupation happening just as Israel finally agrees to let private goods back into Gaza to try and ease suffering. It's quite the juxtaposition.
It is. And this brings the U.S. into the picture and the wider implications for the Middle East situation. President Trump, as mentioned in the source, he's voiced concern, sure, about the humanitarian side, wants a ceasefire. But he's also, quite conspicuously, taken Israel's side in blaming Hamas for talks collapsing. And he's echoed that Israeli rhetoric about needing alternative ways to get hostages back. His thinking might be shaped by people like Steve Witkoff, his Middle East envoy. Witkoff visited Gaza before Trump gave that Riviera speech back in February, remember, floating that vision of a prosperous future Gaza. It really highlights the complexity of the U.S. position trying to balance humanitarian concerns with backing Israel's objectives. What measures are even possible for the U.S. here? It's tricky.
And then you have Netanyahu's critics speculating that for him, maybe the only plan is to continue the war, not just militarily, but politically, because his ultranationalist coalition partners, they'd likely collapse the government if he stopped short of their maximalist goals, which points to a huge risk for Israel's own political stability, doesn't it?
It really does. And that connects to another incredibly sensitive issue. The allegations of ethnic cleansing. I'm co-writing. For critics on the left, both in Israel and globally, any new large-scale assault on populated areas just looks like more evidence for this charge. It's a charge Israel utterly rejects, calling it anti-Semitism and Hamas propaganda. But opponents seize on things like Trump's Middle East Riviera vision. They interpret that as, a cynical picture of a future Gaza, just without Gazans. Israel's official line right now is they'd facilitate voluntary departure for Palestinian civilians, but crucially, no third country has stepped up to accept refugees, which complicates everything about long-term solutions or how this situation evolves.
So the final call on this full occupation plan, it still needs the green light from Israel's security cabinet. They're expected to meet soon. It's not set in stone yet. And everyone's watching LT Genzamir, aren't they? Looking for any sign of public pushback. The reports say he's pretty phlegmatic in private, keeping quiet publicly. Even the defense minister, Israel Katz, recently just said the IDF will professionally implement ministers' decisions. Sounds like the military is ready to follow orders, regardless of private reservations.
It certainly seems that way. And it's important to remember there are other viewpoints being discussed on hostage rescue. LT Kol Yaron Buskila, former Special Forces, argues for things like targeted raids or using pressure to force negotiations. His point is interesting. Negotiations themselves can be a weapon. Just opening communication forces choices on the captors. It suggests there's a spectrum of options beyond just all-out occupation. It underlines that debate within Israel about the best path forward, given the seriousness of the threat. Ultimately, what this deep dive really shows is the impossible bind Israel seems to be in. Pursuing any single objective rescue hostages, destroy Hamas, minimize civilian harm, seems to fundamentally undermine the others. It's an agonizing trap, both internally and on the world stage.
What a tangled web. We've touched on military strategy, the huge humanitarian cost, the political infighting in Israel, the international pressures. It's all interconnected in this potential move towards full occupation. Every single choice has these massive ripple effects. And maybe the most unsettling thought for you, the listener, is realizing that some of this devastation isn't just collateral damage. It's part of a strategy, tragically designed by Hamas, using civilian suffering to rally condemnation against Israel. It weaponizes the very crisis itself. Really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can anyone claim a win when the battlefield itself is engineered for these lose-lose outcomes?
That's exactly it. The challenges are layered, they're interconnected, they're changing constantly. Understanding all these facets, the internal Israeli debates, the grim realities of urban warfare, Hamas's strategy, it's all crucial if you want to grasp what's really happening and maybe what comes next. The big question hanging over everything is, what kind of peace, if any, could possibly grow from a foundation built on such deliberate destruction and such impossible choices? If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Geostrategic Podcast for more in-depth analysis on topics that shape our world. Stay informed, stay ahead, and stay tuned for the next episode.